he has become maybe even the best player in the world. So, Euro 2024, pretty open and shut case, right? Might as well give England the trophy now before we even get to July 14 in the Olympiastadion in Berlin, because England aren't even the joint favourites with France anymore. They are the favourites and have been for a number of weeks. Well, maybe we should not think that far ahead, because there are a few little issues we need to iron out before we get there. Well, what we're pretty sure of is Gareth Southgate's team picks itself. Well, almost picks itself. Three little things they need to look at. Firstly, of course, is left back. Now, Luke Shaw, having scored in the Euro 2020 final and how close he was to scoring the winning goal in a European Championship final, he doesn't look like he's going to be fit enough for this. Coming back mid-May, even Gareth Southgate, who likes to be loyal to his favoured men, is admitting it looks a little bit tight. So this leaves England really with two options. One, Kieran Trippier, who is someone who is not a natural left back, but is trusted. We know can do a good job there, is pretty versatile. One of Southgate's trusted guys who's shown up for him in major tournaments before. But I guess the other option would be Ben Chilwell, because Chilwell is another one who's just coming back from injury. But we know Southgate really loves him. We know Southgate trusts him, and crucially, he's left-footed as well. So when you look at that, and when you look at the fact that Trippier has only just come back for Newcastle in mid-May after an injury, it's a difficult sort of choice. There is no ideal choice, but he's going to have to pick one of those two probably. Now, midfield partner for Declan Rice, this is perhaps the most tricky thing facing Southgate over the next couple of weeks as he makes his mind up how he's going to go into the tournament. Obviously, in the past, Rice would have been partnered by Calvin Phillips, and it would have been absolutely perfect, because we know that Phillips loves to sit, and we know from the way that Declan Rice plays for Arsenal now, he's comfortable with that, and he's become one of the best players in the Premier League, being a little bit more adventurous. He's probably going to have to play within himself actually a little bit more in this tournament because of the personnel challenges there are. Now, there are three options really. Trent Alexander-Arnold being one. Of course, we've seen him play in midfield a little bit more and become more involved for Gareth Southgate, playing in midfield rather than right back. And maybe he could be that deep-lying playmaker for England that gives them an extra dimension. Maybe the most obvious one is Kobbie Mainoo. Now that sounds strange, of course, less than 25 starts in the first team for Manchester United, but the 18-year-old looks to the manner born. He looks totally comfortable in an England shirt, and we can trust him to do the simple things well. The other possibility has been floated as Jude Bellingham. But of course, we know Bellingham can do a great job in that deeper lying role, but why would we want him there when he's become possibly even the best player in the world in a far more advanced position for Real Madrid? And of course, the thing that really stops us wanting Bellingham playing in that deeper role, we want him in the number 10, because of course, he is become maybe even the best player in the world in that advanced role for Real Madrid as they wait for Kylian Mbappe this season. So surely Southgate is going to play him there right next to Harry Kane, just behind him, almost as close as they were when Bellingham was trying to put him off when he was taking that penalty for Bayern in the Champions League semi-final. So that means that your left wing pretty much takes care of itself. It's Phil Foden. England is so lucky to have the option of either Bellingham or Foden to play behind Kane, but it has to be Bellingham. And with Saka left-footed and on the right-hand side, where he's been so effective for England for a long, long time now, it means Foden has to play on the left. And I don't think this is a consolation prize by any stretch of the imagination, because Foden's quite rare, even though we've seen him be so effective in central areas for Manchester City this season. The fact is, he's to the manner born on the left-hand side. It's quite unusual because, of course, we're so used to seeing inverted wingers at the moment, but Foden is brilliant on getting up behind fullbacks on the outside. He's going to be giving right-backs a hell of a lot of trouble during the Euro 2024. So I think we're looking at Saka, Bellingham, Foden, just behind Kane, and that sounds pretty good to me. Well, we know England have got the talent to win the tournament, but the biggest question is over this guy. Is Gareth Southgate too cautious? Now, I've always taken the view that actually he understands exactly how international tournaments are won, and it's not normally with dead exciting football. If we go back over the last couple of decades, looking specifically at the Euros, you've got Greece in 2004, playing in quite a contained way, quite a defensive way to win the tournament in Portugal. You wind forward to, I guess, a more posh team, a posh version of Greece in Euro 2016 when Portugal did that, and Fernando Santos and his quite defensive tactics saw them winning the tournament in France ahead of the hosts, who are a far more exciting team to watch under Didier Deschamps. And then maybe Deschamps learns from that, because in the World Cup a couple of years later, France are actually a little bit circumspect in the way they win the tournament in Russia. So maybe Southgate has realised that you don't have to play dazzling football to go on and win a tournament. However, we can then go back and look at the last couple of major tournaments. Italy win Euro 2020 at Wembley, playing really exciting football under Roberto Mancini all the way through. And then we look at the 2022 World Cup, which was off the hook crazy, a wild final, and Argentina win it at the end of it just ahead of France. So maybe recency bias tells us that you can be a bit more expansive and win a tournament. But hang on, I think you have to set Euro 2020 and World Cup 2022 as sort of one-offs, because of course Euro 2020 football is still affected by the schedule changes of COVID, so all bets are off in that sense. And then World Cup 2022, the only World Cup that's placed in the middle of a season, when of course teams don't have that problem with energy, of course, because the players have only played half a season, whereas going into this tournament, all the top players have played 55, 60 games. So you can't expect them to go full on pressing, intensity, all that sort of stuff. Saving energy is the wise way to go. So maybe this is the tournament where Southgate and his more circumspect ideas have proved right. Now, what's an interesting little narrative for this tournament is seeing Harry Kane and Jude Bellingham trying to triumph in Germany, which in recent times has had a massive effect on both of their careers. Of course, the 3 years that Jude Bellingham had at Borussia Dortmund will be seen, I think, in years to come as his pathway to becoming the best player in the world. He grew up, he became a man, although he was a man from the beginning when he arrived and made his debut for Dortmund in the DFB Pokal, the German Cup. So I think he'll feel good at playing at a place where he had the confidence and he learned the confidence to play for one of the biggest clubs in the world. I think he'll be a leader for England out there in a place where he really feels comfortable. He knows all the stadiums, he knows the stands, he has that feeling of succeeding there. With Harry Kane, of course, it's slightly different because he was already an established superstar when he arrived in Munich. But the response he got from people and the way he's been taken to the hearts of not just Bavarian fans, but German football fans in general, I think has given him an extra little lift and given him a little bit of new life. People have been absolutely taken by him since he's arrived. His goals, his leadership, his calm demeanour, all of those things have made people convinced, when a lot of people thought initially it was a lot of money to pay for a near 30-year-old, have made people convinced that Bayern have made the right decision. And of course, people have looked at the fact that Bayern didn't win the title this season, or any title this season, so Kane is still without major silverware. But I think people have slightly misread the reason why Harry Kane went to Germany. It wasn't just to win the Bundesliga, it was to be able to compete and have a chance of winning the Champions League every single year, which a player of that sort of stature should have been doing throughout his career, really. So he's in a different win stuff zone when he's in Germany. So also, like Bellingham, he has that feeling of succeeding, of scoring goals in this context, at these stadiums, but also the feeling that he's building something. This is his future as well as his recent past. Now, we know England have got enviable talent to pick this summer, but we've been talking about all the possible permutations, Kane, Bellingham. What if Bukayo Saka was player of the tournament for England? I really think Euro 2024 could be his domain. Now, when we're talking about all the possibilities for Southgate, we're not talking about Saka really, are we? Because we know exactly where he's going to play. He's going to play on that right wing cutting in, where he's been so effective for Arsenal and England in the past. And if we look at this Arsenal season, he must be coming in to this tournament feeling absolutely brilliant about himself, because Arsenal have had a wonderful season. He's been at the absolute heart of it. His best ever Premier League goals total, over 25 goal involvements in the Premier League, if that's the way that you prefer to frame it. And if we look at the more niche numbers, he's someone as well who's having more shots than he's ever had before. So whereas his total shots per game sort of wavered around the high 1.75, 1.8 to around 2.2 in previous seasons, now he's having over 3 shots per game. What does that tell us? That tells us that here is a guy, even at a relatively young age, who feels that he deserves to be the man, who feels that he can have that shot, that he can take responsibility. And that will be crucial, I think, especially in the knockout games. Having a Saka who's not only incredibly effective, but knows that he can seize the big moments in these games. We've seen it in the Premier League. We've seen it in the Champions League, where he's been brilliant this season. In a first Champions League campaign, remember, where he took Arsenal to the quarterfinals, could have taken them even further. We've seen him do it in an England shirt in the qualifying campaign as well. So you know what? I think when the big moments show up, Bukayo Saka is going to seize them for England this summer. Now, England will be coming out of the traps in this Euro 2024 campaign in Gelsenkirchen, trying to put to rest the ghost of World Cup 2006, that horrible penalty shootout against Portugal, against Serbia. So what sort of threat does Serbia pose? Well, it's the first time as an independent nation they've qualified for the Euros. And they'll be led in by a real star of Balkans football, their coach is Dragan Stojkovic, which will, make the heart of older fans flutter a little bit. But if we're looking at their current stars, they are a team that's come a long way in the last little while. Of course, despite having so much talent, they've missed a lot of major championships in recent years, even though they've qualified for the last couple of World Cups. And I think they can really do something here, because in the recent past, they've had a lot of technical ability, Serbia, but maybe been a little bit veteran-y and slow at the back and in midfield. Now, I think they can make light of this time. Of course, they do have veterans like Dusan Tadic, who's still doing pretty well for Fenerbahce, but I think the younger ones are the ones that we want to focus on. Sergej Milinkovic-Savic in midfield, who's really box-to-box, who can score and assist, 6'4", loads of physical power as well, and of course, you'll be familiar with Alexander Mitrovic. And I think if you look at the scoring form of Mitrovic over the last little while, okay, in the Saudi Pro League, it shows he's still ticking over nicely. And if you look at the fact that both him and Sergej Milinkovic-Savic have not been under the pressure of a European season in the same way as a lot of these other players in the tournament are, I think they might have a little bit more in the tank to have a go at this. Now, it's not really a major tournament, is it, unless Denmark and England come up against each other at some stage. They're the second group stage opponent for England. And under Kasper Hjulmand, they've got quite nice stability over the last little while. Of course, semi-finalists, where they were knocked out by England in that epic semi-final in Euro 2020, 3 years ago. But what they were lacking then was a little bit of experience. They had more of that for the World Cup in 2022, but what was the problem for them then? They were lacking a real goal scorer. This time, enter Rasmus Højlund. And I think that makes a massive difference for them, to have a versatile goal scorer who admittedly has had his moments of struggle at Manchester United, haven't all Manchester United players at some point this season. I think that could really help. The massive problem for Denmark, I suppose, is what's carried them through the last few tournaments is their midfield. Pierre-Emil Højbjerg and, of course, Christian Eriksen. Both of those have had their challenges in the Premier League this season, not played as consistently and as well as they'd hoped to. So maybe this is an opportunity for England to get one over them a little bit more comfortably than they have done in the past. Now, I've got another first-timer in Slovenia for England's third group game. Now, of course, there's a clear class gap between Slovenia and England, but there are a few star players who could make it really, really tough for Gareth Southgate's team. The obvious one, of course, is the goalkeeper, Jan Oblak, who might see a little bit of action here. Now, he is a goalkeeper who I don't think really gets his props. He's been one of the best goalkeepers in the world for coming on a decade now, which is how long he's been at Atletico Madrid, Champions League finalist. And of course, he's seen a little bit more action than he'd wanted to over the last couple of seasons, simply because Atletico's defence has got so much worse over the last little while. They're not the defensive juggernaut that they previously were under Diego Simeone. At the other end of the pitch, we've got a real rising star in Benjamin Šeško, who nearly signed for Manchester United going back a year and a half. Now, he's a striker who's got better and better as the season's gone on with RB Leipzig, and he's a physical threat. So he's something a little bit different for both Harry Maguire and John Stones to deal with. So a few little potential speed bumps for England in that group, but you would still expect them to win it with some comfort, and hopefully that will set them up for what could be an absolutely titanic clash with France in that half of the draw before they get to Berlin. Next up, I'll be looking at the biggest threat to England winning Euro 2024.